for the realization that history is not just about the great personages who created and led the nation, but also about the people from the margins whose blood, sweat, toil, and tears built our country, that we may always be sympathetic to the plight of the common man. Grant us a sound mind to discern, with the guidance of your Spirit, what is relevant and true using our God-given reason. Give us the diligence in finding our sources, the most exhaustive we can get for any given topic. Protect our sources from destruction and neglect, and preserve our national memory. Provide us with a critical mind in analyzing the sources we may arrive closest to the truth, while recognizing that there can be as many perspectives as it can be. Teach us to be fair to each party of the present, can also have the power to unite us, and the power to make us proud of ourselves, so we can build our own identity as a people. Demonstrate to us that our understanding of our own culture enriches our perspective of the past. Help us become a bridge of understanding between the academe and the people, and make us learn the lessons of the past so we could create solutions to our present problems towards attaining a better future. Despite the gifts that you have given us, may we stay humble and see our work as a way of serving our students, our readers, our publics. Yet, may we see ourselves as bearers of true enlightenment and justice, not enablers of darkness and ignorance. May the way we tell the stories of our past be relevant to our people, that they may learn something from it. May we bring history closer to the people, all for your greater glory and for the nation that you have given us. Amen.
Joining us for today, welcome to the Panel C of the Session 9 of the Philippine International Quincentennial Conference. I am John Paul Egalina Villera from Project Saysay, and I will be your moderator for today's panel entitled Philippine Itinerary of the Magellan-Elcano Expedition. We are currently live on almost 100 Facebook pages, primarily at the National Quincentennial Committee, Department of Foreign Affairs and other foreign service posts, National Historical Commission of the Philippines, and the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, among others. We had the first two panels of Session 9 last December 2, convened by the National Museum of the Philippines, where they presented 5 researches that explored the rich and diverse world of our pre-colonial ancestors, using archaeological practices in uncovering aspects of its technological, maritime, and other traditions. For today's panel, we will examine closely the core of the 2021 Quincentennial commemorations in the Philippines, which is the Philippine route of the Magellan-Elcano expedition. In previous commemorations of this historic event, the primary focus was on the Armada de Maluco and their triumph over the challenges that faced them. However, this focus put an unequal burden on our ancestors, who were equally responsible for the eventual success of the historic endeavor. This 2021, the NHCP put primacy on the indigenous perspective of this historic event, with 34 different quincentennial events remembered this year. So for this afternoon, the first article that will be read was written by Mr. Robert Kuti. Bob, as he was fondly called, was an independent British researcher based in Balangiga, Eastern Samar. A member of the Royal Historical Society, he was noted for his demystification of the Balangiga incident of 1901 in his book Hang the Dogs, which was published in 2004. Recently, he published Fools of Gold, Volume 1, Fraud, Fallacy, and Fable in Philippine History, with Volume 2 recently written. Sadly, Mr. Kuti passed away last September 21. His article, which is about the creation of Enrique de Malacca as a Cebuano by the historian Carlos Quirino, will be read today by Ms. Ayesha Sayseng Apostol of the NQC Secretariat.
The historical sins of Carlos Quirino. Much of the myth and misinformation about Enrique can be laid at the door of eminent historian Carlos Quirino, a formidable figure in the Philippine historical community and national artist for historical literature, honored on a postal stamp, who single-handedly created the myth of Enrique speaking Cebuano and his imaginary origins in the Philippines. The first time I engaged with Quirino's lack of historicity was while researching the Battle of Balangiga of 28 September 1901. A claim that guerrillas were smuggled into the town of Balangiga under cover of a cockfight came from his pen and was consistently repeated in other historical works. In fact, he had mistranslated the Waray word pintakasi, which actually means communal work in Waray, but which many Tagalogs used to mean a cockfight. This error is relevant to his creation of a Cebuano Enrique de Malacca. Despite submitting his research in other areas to the rigorous peer review of appropriate journals, a process in which subject matter experts access a contribution, he did not do so with his claims regarding Enrique. His interpretation of Enrique began in the 1970s and appeared in a book of a lecture, Pigafetta, First Italian in the Philippines, which he gave in 1980. Published in Italians in the Philippines, 3 lectures held at the University of the Philippines on July 16, 1980 by Carlos Quirino, Esteban A. de Ocampo, and Giuliano Berticcioli, published by the Philippine Italian Association. In his lecture, Quirino says, after leaving Homonhon on Monday Thursday, a baroto from the west came alongside the Spanish ships. The slave Enrique spoke to Pigafetta. They immediately understood him. From that time on, conversation between the natives and the Spaniards proceeded quickly with Enrique as interpreter. How could Enrique have known the Cebuano language? The tongue spoken in Malacca is very different from that of any Philippine language. The only explanation is that Enrique originally came from Cebu. He was probably captured as a boy of 10 or 12 and taken as a slave to Malacca. Tomé de Pires, the first Portuguese ambassador to China, wrote in 1513 that Borneans voyaged to Luzones to buy gold and foodstuff, which they traded in Malacca. It is highly probable that Enrique was one of those captured in a raid. At that time, a colony of Luzones existed in Malacca, which had been seized by the Portuguese and was a great center in Southeast Asia. Magellan must have talked to young Enrique, and hearing that he came from a group of islands in the same longitude as the Spice Islands, decided to buy and bring him to Europe, where they tarried for several years before Magellan could make the trip under the auspices of the Spanish king, Carlos I. Linguistic evidence is conclusive that the so-called slave Enrique was a Cebuano. I broached this matter to Admiral Samuel Eliot Morrison during his visit to Manila several years ago in preparation for his biography of Magellan. But he refused to consider the matter. For then it would not be Ferdinand Magellan who was the first to go around the world, nor Sebastian Elcano the Spaniard, but a humble Filipino named Enrique. It is high time that we Filipinos render Enrique that homage. Thanks to the Italian chronicler Pigafetta, who carried the young Cebuano's name in the first account of the circumnavigation of the world. This is extremely problematic. Quirino ignores the landing at Masawa and Enrique's communication with the datos there. Quirino's argument requires that Enrique spoke both Butuanon and Cebuano, as well as being fluent in Spanish and Malay, and Chamorro. Quirino sets aside Pigafetta's statement that the Datos understood Enrique because they spoke several languages. He ignores the fact that trade Malay was spoken in every trading port throughout maritime Southeast Asia. He does not explain why the ruler of a well-developed international trading port like Cebu did not speak the common business language of the entire region. Giving Enrique an imaginary backstory based on a false premise does not add anything to our knowledge of Enrique. He gives Enrique an accurate knowledge of longitude, which could not be determined until John Harrison's marine chronometer was invented 2 centuries later. There is no way to calculate longitude accurately without a precise chronometer, which was not available to Magellan or Enrique. Quirino presents no linguistic evidence, assumes some conspiracy-induced motive to Morrison, a Magellan biographer who retraced Magellan's route in 1971. Morrison seems to have been more familiar with primary sources that Quirino ignored. By 1991, Quirino had turned his might have, must have, could have speculations based on incorrect assumptions about language into these indisputable facts. In the Philippine Free Press of December 29 that year, he published an article, "The First Man Around the World Was a Filipino." In this, we are told that Magellan learned that there was a teenage male to be bought at the slave market, one who, after he had conversation with him, said that he had come from an island farther than the east than Sabah on the same longitude as the Moluccas, but considerably north of it. The young slave, subsequently baptized with the name of Enriquez, must have told Magellan how he had been captured by Muslim pirates and that Europeans were unknown in his area of the Pacific Ocean. He must have come from one of the islands then known as the Luzones, about 12 days by sail northeast of Borneo. Here, Quirino is building on the sand with not a pebble of foundation.